For thousands of years, humanity had one serious problem with fire. It wasn't about putting it out. It was about starting it in the first place. You needed a flint, some tinder, and a whole lot of patience. Or you had to make sure the fire in your hearth never, ever went out. And now, you pull a thin stick from a box, one quick strike, and you have a flame. Seems obvious, right? But that simplicity is an illusion, because the history of the match is anything but simple. It's got poison, strikes, and one of the greatest financial frauds of all time. Let's go back to 1680. London. An English physicist named Robert Boyle is sitting in his laboratory, experimenting with phosphorus, an element so rare and unpredictable it was worth more than gold. Boyle coated a strip of rough paper, with phosphorus end dipped a wooden splint in sulfur. When he dragged the wood across the paper, a flame burst to life. It was the first match-made fire in human history. But there was one big problem. Phosphorus cost a fortune. Mass production was out of the question, and so that brilliant idea fell asleep for nearly 150 years. The alarm clock finally rang in 1826 in a small town called Stockton-on-Tees in northern England. An apothecary named John Walker was mixing chemicals in his mortar: antimony sulfide, potassium chlorate, and gum arabic. A dried lump of the mixture accidentally scraped against a stone floor and burst into flame. Walker knew immediately what he had. In April of 1827, he began selling the first friction matches, a box of 50 for 1 shilling. And here's the first twist. Michael Faraday, one of the most famous scientists of the era, urged Walker to patent his invention. Walker refused. He believed something this useful should be available to everyone. He never earned a single penny from it. But a London chemist named Samuel Jones copied the idea, improved it slightly, and launched it under the dramatic name Lucifer. Lucifer matches were violent. They sparked, they crackled, and they reeked of sulfur. But people bought them, because for the first time in history, you could start a fire with a single flick of the wrist. In 1830, a young French chemistry student named Charles Sauria made what seemed like a small change. He swapped antimony sulfide for white phosphorus. The new matches were smaller, easier to light, and didn't stink. They became a sensation across Europe. Sauria never patented his invention and died in poverty in 1903. But that's not even the worst part of this story. White phosphorus turned out to be a deadly poison. In the match factories, the workers were mostly women and children, breathing in phosphorus fumes for up to 14 hours a day. A disease developed that came to be known as phossy jaw. The phosphorus attacked the teeth and bones of the face. The jawbone, literally rotting while you were still alive, would glow in the dark with an eerie greenish light. 1 in 5 people who developed it died. In July of 1888, 1,400 women workers at the Bryant and May factory in London's East End said enough. The matchgirls' strike made history. 14-hour shifts, starvation wages, fines for talking at your workstation, and hanging over all of it, the spectre of phossy jaw. A journalist named Annie Besant exposed the factory conditions in her newspaper and unleashed a firestorm. The women won. Fines were abolished. Meals were moved to separate rooms away from the phosphorus fumes. That strike helped launch the new unionism movement in Britain. The solution to the phosphorus problem came from Sweden, and long before the strike. As early as 1844, a Swedish professor named Gustav Erik Pasch had a revolutionary idea. Instead of putting phosphorus on the match head, he moved it to the side of the box and replaced the toxic white phosphorus with harmless red phosphorus. The match couldn't ignite on its own anymore. It needed the box. This was the invention of the safety match. The only problem was that Parsh's matches were too expensive, and his factory went bankrupt within 4 years. It took the brothers Johan and Carl Lundström to turn the safety match into a mass-market product. They refined Parsh's technology, cut production costs, and in 1855 won an award at the World's Fair in Paris. Their matches were safe, cheap, and reliable. They conquered market after market. To this day, in many languages, safety matches are simply called Swedish matches. And in 1906, the Berne Convention officially banned the use of white phosphorus in match production. It was the first international treaty in history to prohibit an industrial substance. But the story of the match has one more unexpected chapter. In the early decades of the 20th century, a Swedish financier named Ivar Kreuger built an empire, controlling 3/4 of the world's match production. He lent money to indebted governments in exchange for match monopolies in their countries. Problem? The entire empire was built on forged bonds and fictitious companies. When Kreuger took his own life in 1932, it turned out that the Match King had been running one of the greatest financial frauds in history, decades before Bernard Madoff. So next time you reach for a match, take a moment to really look at it. That unassuming little stick with a coloured head carries over 300 years of science, human drama, and unexpected twists. From Boyle's laboratory, through the poisons of the factories and the courage of striking workers, to a global monopoly built on lies. Today we live in an age of lighters and gas stoves, wife electronic ignition. Matches are slowly fading into background, but that's exactly why it's worth remembering what they really are. Not just a disposable trinket, a piece of human history you hold between your fingers, one that changed the world with a single strike, the story behind